Okay. I'm just going to kind of write off kind of the things that we sort of talked about, I guess. Um, Thank you. The needs of policy, what we need to be considering in the development of policy. It should be enabling and not prescriptive, nor should it be crippling. And in terms of crippling, we mean both to the industry and to society, because society can't afford to support the policy, then there's going to be difficulties implementing it. It needs to keep pace and not overcome the technology that it's trying to address, and focus on the intent of the technology in the context of the product. It should be adaptive and flexible, and the management needs to consider multiple impacts across the board, because as we know with biofuels, it has impacts all across the board in terms of development, land use, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and so on. Cost-benefit analysis is a very important part of it, of doing this, and it's important to monitor the implementation of your policy both in the short and the long term, so that you can see trends and know if it's having the effect, certainly the intended one. In developing policy, it's important to take a look at case studies, or do some kind of a historical analysis of something for lessons learned, and look at the context and trends over time. And a good example we had of that was the telecommunications industry here in Canada. It should be multidisciplinary and open and transparent and inclusive. And I understand the term for that is transdisciplinary. So that's a new one for me. It should create a fair and level playing field for the emerging technology, and so that it's developed in the context of smart regulations. And that, of course, is a major problem with ethanol right now. Biofuels in general is we don't have a level playing field with the fossil fuel industry. Biofuel policies should be built on other policies, such as energy policies, agricultural, without duplication. When crafting these kinds of policies, you need to look at these other ones to find conflicts that need to be corrected, perhaps overlaps and duplication that could be addressed, make it more streamlined and easy to implement. Legal authority is an important thing to consider. In the case of Canada, that includes jurisdiction, but the other thing is the context of legislation, what it tells you that you can and cannot do. It should be focused on incentives for new technologies and for technological development, but don't penalize previously developed technologies that may be being built on. So biofuels is a good example. You've got corn ethanol moving to cellulosic and so on from there. It must be implementable, and an important factor of actually implementing it is to have some kind of a support for it. And you know, that's a political decision, and we're all hampered by that, but that's one of the main problems that we have with the way we tend to approach policy and whatnot, is that we don't look long enough term, and so many of these kinds of things, and increasingly so, need to go beyond the flavor of the day. They should needs to consider the international framework and harmonization. And in context of harmonization, there are things such as policing, compliance, and enforcement that need to be considered. And harmonization shouldn't necessarily be blanket across the board. It really should be done only when it's feasible and desirable, and there may be instances where that is not the case. Should embrace the precautionary principle, and there should be no ambiguity. And we should know what question is being answered, and are we asking the right question. Regional cooperation, we can think in terms of a kind of a continuum from information sharing to harmonization with the development of spontaneous standards and cooperative harmonization is interim stops in there. Policy will require strong leadership and coordination and horizontal integration, because so many of these things, they're complex, and they have impacts, both positive and negative benefits across the board and in many different areas. And don't duplicate efforts. You don't want policies that are going to conflict with one another. Some of the tools that can be used, and these are in no particular order: cap and trade regimes, carbon taxes, mandates, so specific mandates for the different aspects that might impact. So, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, rural development, land use impacts, and so on. There needs to be consumer incentives, and we've heard about that here. You know, it's all well and fine to have an E85 vehicle, but if you can't find a gas station to fill up, you know, if you have one, you're not going to be able to do your part to contribute to greenhouse gas reduction. We should also be looking at efficiency. So energy efficiency is key as well. Reduction of consumption is going to be a very important part of energy policies in the future. Scoping in the context of the policy development will be very important, and that needs to be very well articulated so that everyone knows that the playing field that we're on and everyone's working on the same page. Basically, what is the big picture goal? Where do we want to be? And answering those questions are going to be a challenge, particularly when you're being open and transparent and have many different perspectives at the table. And that's it. Thank you.